Greetings, gratitude, and welcome to day one of this 7-day micro course on understanding emotional reactions and co regulation. Today, we're laying the groundwork for everything else that we're going to talk about this week. And trust me, this is the kind of stuff that once you learn it, you cannot unsee it. You'll start noticing it everywhere, mainly in yourself, in your kids, in your relationships, and even in strangers. Okay. Um, if y'all can't tell, I am very excited about y'all being here and taking this journey with me. I put on my 90s theme makeup with the thin eyebrows and everything, so y'all know I'm serious. But I'm goofy. I'm gonna be goofy. I hope you all enjoy my personality that comes along with this because that's a part of the package. Okay, let's start with a question. Have you ever had a emotional reaction to something that even surprised you? Like maybe you snapped at someone or got overwhelmed out of nowhere or just shut completely down and later on you were like, why did I react like that? Well, that's what we're breaking down today. What actually is happening when emotions take over and why learning co-regulation is one of the most powerful tools that you can have. Okay, first things first, let's talk about what co regulation actually is. It's the process of one nervous system helping another nervous system regulate. It's not just about words, it's about presence, it's about energy, and it's about safety. Okay. Neuroscientists talk about something called neuroception, which is our brain's automatic ability to detect whether an environment or a person is safe or dangerous. The wild part is we're not even consciously aware that we're doing it, okay? Our bodies are reading facial expressions, tone of voice, micro movements, and deciding, am I safe here or do I need to protect myself? The parts of the brain that are responsible for neuroception are being programmed from day one. So when a baby cries and their caregiver soothes them, the baby's nervous system learns I can feel big things and someone will help me regulate. But if a baby cries and no one responds, or even worse, they're met with anger or punishment, the nervous system learns that my distress is dangerous and I'm on my own. This is why co regulation isn't just like a nice thing, it's literally how our systems learn safety. Okay, so now let's break down what's actually happening when we or our kids have big emotional reactions. The nervous system runs the show, okay? Kids usually express these reactions with tantrums, shutting down, ignoring directions, being clingy or dramatic. In adults, we see things like shutting down, avoiding conflict, lashing out, over explaining, procrastinating. Okay. Now, just to make something super clear, these reactions are not random. They're hardwired biological responses based on what our nervous system has learned about safety and stress, right? I'm going to go over the four different responses that we can have when our nervous system senses that we are in danger. And then I'm going to tell a quick story about why I got super interested in these specific reactions and how they come about. So we have response that could be defensiveness, anger, arguing, aggression. This is when our body is preparing to protect itself, right? Then we also have the flight response, which is avoidance, distraction, anxiety, over explaining, where our body is preparing to escape stress. We have the freeze response, things like zoning out, brain fog, not knowing what to say, right? Our body is preparing to shut down. And then more recently, people started to recognize the Fawn response, which is people pleasing, apologizing, over accommodating. This is our body trying to stay safe by keeping other people happy. So, the way we respond under stress is not a choice. It's a deeply ingrained survival pattern based on our past experience. And this is true for both children and adults. Okay, so now it's story time. Like I was saying, I had an incident that prompted me to really question these particular responses. After it, I was like, I have no flight response, only fight. But these responses are very primitive, and they are ingrained in our DNA. From way back in ancient times, like the freeze is about being in a presence where you're with animals and it's dangerous. So you like play dead. Like that's where these reactions kind of are rooted in. Okay, but here's the story. It was like around the 2021 time frame. I know for sure it was 2021 because that's when my sister passed away, and I had just come back from her funeral, and I was getting like back into the swing of work. With work, when you're grieving someone close to you passed away, they give you 3 days, and they're like, okay, get back at it or whatever. Thankfully, I was working remotely, so I didn't necessarily have to go into like a corporate office, but I did have a co-work space that I had paid to be in or whatever. It was a group of entrepreneurs who were, working on their own businesses. And it was just very, inspiring to be in that space, to be able to do my corporate work and then also work on all my entrepreneurial endeavors that I was embarking on at that time. My kids were there with me. They were out in the lobby in class for their coursework because, this is post-COVID. So everybody is still going to school virtually. The, spring after COVID or whatever, kids hadn't gone back to school just yet. They were still doing homeschooling, but through the school. So it was more like virtual schooling is what you call it anyway. But to make a long story short, the individual who I was in the office space with also was experiencing some grief, and they were needing solitude and time to themselves. And the way that they expressed that to me caused me to shift into my fight reaction, right? So basically, this person asked me to leave, and I was like, well, my kids are in the middle of their school day, but whenever they get done, I will go ahead and leave. And so the person gets up and they go into another room and they come back with their gun case and set it down. It's like, I asked you to leave. And all of my logical senses kind of shut down from that point, and I was in autopilot. I was like, oh, so what, you gonna shoot me? And we end up getting into this big altercation. I bumped, he was charging towards me, and instead of moving out of the way, I, held my ground to like bump into him or whatever. Here I am, like this grown ass man. And it's, my fight response is responding when, logically the thing to do would have been to remove myself out of that situation. We ended up in a physical altercation, and I lost like a patch of my locks. Of course, he, had some injuries as well. And I'm not proud of that. Just saying that, I didn't understand in hindsight because I was in therapy at the time. I hadn't been in any type of altercations like that in a very long time. But because of trauma that I had experienced in my past with domestic violence and then some things in my childhood as well, my body's defense system said, this is the time to fight. Even though logically looking at that situation, I was like, why didn't I just get up and leave? Like, I got Wi-Fi. My kids could have rode in the car and finished their lessons in the car. Like, we've done that before. Why didn't I just get up and leave? But once the gun entered the situation, all of my logical responses went out of the window. And so since then, I have been like talking to my therapist and doing a lot of my own individual research in order to really understand these emotional responses. And I have made a lot of progress in the space of co-regulation. And learning how to regulate my own responses and that of the individuals that I'm connected to. So that is what brings me to teaching this course and sharing this information for free 99 with everyone that I am connected to in the space of the village and anyone that they would like to share the information with as well. Why does co-regulation matter? I mean, we've answered this question, to a certain extent already, but to be more specific, our nervous system does not learn how to regulate itself in isolation. We learn how to handle our emotions through experience, not logic. Okay. I come from a long line of people who had to use physical violence in their fight reaction in order to defend themselves. And so that information was passed down to me in my DNA and then in my life experiences as a child and going into my early adulthood. those ideas were reinforced. And so in hindsight, I can look at a lot of situations that I had in my life where physical violence resulted or that flight response turned on. And I see how I could have avoided those traumatic situations if I had had this information. So that's why it's important. It really impacts our ability to connect with other people and the outcomes in our relationships. Have you ever noticed that there are some people that when you come around them, you instantly feel calmer? Like just being in their presence makes you feel safe. That's because regulation is contagious. In the same way that we've all had times where we have walked into a room and immediately felt the tension. Nobody had to say anything or tell us what was going on. It's just when you walk in there, you know, it's kind of tense in here. You know what I'm saying? And that is because the dysregulation in those negative or more difficult emotions are also contagious. Okay, so a little bit more science, right? This is where something called the polyvagal theory comes in. Okay, our vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in our body that connects our brains, heart, lungs, and gut, and controls our fight or flight responses. Okay. It also controls our ability to feel safe in connection. When we are regulated, our vagus nerve is in the safe and social state, and we can connect and problem solve and think clearly. But when we are dysregulated, the vagus nerve shifts into danger mode. Rational thinking goes out the window, and our survival instincts take over. Where co regulation comes in and works is because a calm nervous system can help another nervous system return to balance, right? So this is why, like, when one of our children is upset and we respond, yelling, calm down, their body reads that as a threat and it escalates even more. But if we slow down and breathe and speak softly, their body mirrors us instead. So it impacts connection. And we talked a little bit about how it impacts development. If any of you are familiar with attachment theory, you understand what we were talking about earlier about how when a baby cries and the response that they get from their caretaker is going to determine how they gauge whether or not it's safe for them to have like emotional responses and what they can expect when they do have emotional responses, right? And the way that we are treated as young babies and children determines our attachment style as we move into adults. And like I said, anyone who's familiar with attachment theory understands that the best way to move from insecure attachment is to be in relationship with someone who has secure attachment, because they teach you how to co-regulate. So it is essential in the developmental process. If you're not familiar with attachment theory, I definitely suggest that you look into that as well. Like I said, later on in the courses, we'll get to that. But if you don't make it past today, that is one of the topics that is really good for individual study. And then the third aspect is healing, right? I run in a lot of circles with a lot of healers and people who are into like the metaphysical world and spiritual things. And one thing that we're understanding is our brains and emotions and nervous systems are directly tied to how we show up in this experience. And when we go through things and have traumatic experiences and experience big emotions as a result of those experiences, if we do not process those emotions and express them and release them from our body stores those emotions and those experiences, and they can create illness and disease in the body. That's why we see like things like autoimmune diseases and things of that nature popping up, and doctors can't explain where it comes from or what it is. It has been traced to these experiences that we have where we're storing this emotion in the body. So it is very important that we have practices to co-regulate and to release our emotions from our body. So things like movement, breath work, grounding techniques that help us to move these emotions out of the physical body and out of our auras. All right, so now that we got all of that beautiful sciencey stuff out of the way, we know what's happening in the brain and in the nervous system. Now we can talk about how we actually use this in real life. Okay, this is the meat and potatoes of today's mini course, right? These are 3 simple steps that will help us to start co regulating effectively. The first thing is acknowledging the emotion. I know a lot of us, when we were younger and we would be overwhelmed with our emotions, we would hear things like, stop crying, or just get over it. Or someone would tell us, oh, you're okay, when clearly we were not okay, right? And those things are not helpful, you know. Instead, we should acknowledge the emotion with something like, I see you're upset. That makes sense. Let's take a minute. It gives people the opportunity to feel seen, and their nervous system starts to relax by just taking note and acknowledging the way that they're reacting, and letting them know that they have space between the emotions that they're feeling and the next moment, right? The next thing is to model calm responses. Our body language, tone, and presence matter more than our words. Like we were saying earlier, our nervous systems are looking for cues from the people around us as to whether or not we're safe. So if the person who is modeling the calm response can do things like taking deep breaths, having slower speech, relaxing your posture, all those things are going to signal safety to the person who is dysregulated, even if it's you, right? And then the third is to offer a healthy outlet. This goes back to what we're talking about at that healing aspect. So something like moving, breathing techniques, or like simple sensory resets, like touching something cold or biting a lemon. Those things help bring our emotions back into balance. Phew, okay, that was a lot packed into, a small amount of time. But this is just the beginning, okay? Now that we have laid the foundation, we're going to spend the next few days breaking down 5 common emotional reactions. We'll talk about what's really going on underneath them and how to handle them with more clarity and confidence. Tomorrow, we're going to specifically talk about not listening and why it's usually overwhelmed and not defiant when our children or people around us or even ourselves are not following the instructions that we have been given. So, the reflection for today is, have you ever felt instantly calmer just by being around someone with steady energy? I want you to think about what that felt like. And I want you to consider how you can be that person for yourself and others. All right. If you're following along and you made it to this point, please drop a heart in the comments. If this resonated with you, please let me know.